What's going on, everyone? Justin again, as always. Thanks for watching my channel. Welcome back. Look what we picked up today. Find a bottle opener here. Fucking Sam Adams Oktoberfest. I've been waiting for this beer for a long time. This is one of my favorite go-to beers. Now granted, it's not cold yet, so I have a little bit of reservation behind it, but we'll just see. Oh, that's still good. It's still good. I'm gonna have to put that in the fridge though, or the freezer, to try to make it colder, obviously. And I apologize ahead of time for the noise. It's laundry day. We have a busy household. We have lots of kids. You know how it goes. Any rate, getting back to you guys today. Look, today we're gonna be talking about working on old cars. Man, I'll tell you what. We have seen some old stuff this month. Anywhere between late 50s Cadillac Fleetwood to a late 50s, early 60s Impala to the late 60s El Camino. We've had a lot of old school cars come in, and even some that are like a mid to late 90s, like vans and Chevy pickups and things like that, that require you to use SAE and metric. So from time to time I get asked, hey man, how important is it actually to have SAE? It's actually pretty important. There's a handful of sizes that you can skip or get away from or use metric for the most part. Tolerance is a lot of discussion, okay? We won't go into it too much. You guys can share it down in the comments, but I'll tell you this much. There are a handful of tolerance situations that you run into using metric that you can get away with on an SAE car. But if you want the proper fitment, you gotta have SAE. And if you already know you're getting ready to work on something that's slightly older that has the Imperial standard, you're going to want to pick up some Imperial sockets, SAE, right? Whether it's 1/4 inch or 3/8. I haven't really found a huge over-the-top need for oversized sockets for my diesel guys out there in the SAE platform until you start getting into the open end or combination end wrench sets. Then I've utilized anywhere from 1 inch to 1 1/4 to 1 5/16 EGR tubes, turbo tubes, things like that, fuel injectors, etc. There's a SAE just seems to fit a lot better on the diesel platform and has a much snugger fit than the metric version. Not sure if that's because it is in fact an SAE fastener, or in fact it's a metric fastener that has a little bit of extra slop in it due to the manufacturing process of the tool itself. That being said, it is very crucial that you have both SAE and metric from an independent standpoint. Now if you're at the dealership, you know what, you're not going to run into SAE as much as you think you are. On some older cars, sure, absolutely, but on some of the more modern and new day cars, no. It's going to be metric, Torx, E-Torx, Turbo Torx, Turbo Max, Tamper Torx, etc. You're going to run into a lot of different situations where you need specific sockets or specialty sockets to get into and work on these new modern cars. Whereas back in the day, way back in the day, it was pretty much SAE, and if you ran into a situation with a more modernized old school car, it was metric. So for the most part, you kind of got away from it. Until you fell into Jeep. Jeep, for whatever reason, in all their glory, decided that 2 E-Torx on the top of the bell housing would be perfect for their design when it came to bolting the transmission to the engine. Why, oh why they ever did that, I'll never know. But I'll tell you this much, if I ever pull one out and it's mine, I'm changing them out for an actual fastener with the correct thread pitch with a bolt head design that actually fits the hex socket that I'm using for the rest of the bolts. Alright. That being said, look guys, I know there's a lot of tools out there that you could purchase and buy. You want to buy the best quality stuff you possibly can. I've used my fair share, anything from Harbor Freight to Husky, from Husky to Tecton to Snap-on to Matco to Cornwell. Every single wrench, socket, and everything else has fit a specific way. And I will tell you this, tolerance does make a difference, and each one has a different tolerance issue. Okay, so I've had a series of 14mm and 9/16 wrenches or combination wrenches or ratchet wrenches, and they all fit a little bit differently. And of the 6 that I was testing out, half fit and half didn't. Half fit and half didn't. That's for SAE and metric. Why? If it's one fastener, why wouldn't they all just fit? Well, that comes down to tolerance and how they were made, where they were made, etc. I did a video not too long ago, but probably long enough for you guys to have to scroll through the vineyard of mechanic vlog videos that I've done once upon a time ago. But at one point in time, I actually did share those video clips in a video sharing with you tolerance and just the amount of difference between various wrench sets when it came to Matco, Craftsman, Snap-on, Gear Wrench, etc. So, yeah, man, it does make a little bit of a difference. Now, talking about some of the newer products that are coming out, I have not tried any of the new Milwaukee combination wrenches yet. I have not tried any of the new Tekton combination wrenches yet. We did a video not too long ago where I was sharing some of my thoughts on that, how I felt about Tekton, so to speak. Okay, back in my day, they were the cheap of the cheap. They were the bargain bin special. They were the worst of the worst. You did not invest money into that company. But then some 10 years later, yeah, they improved their quality. They started stepping up their game. And apparently, from all the comments that I've been receiving, their warranty process is pretty easy. Now, granted, you still have to have it mailed to you, but you can take a picture of it, send it to them, and they'll just send you the new product or the replacement product for the specific tool that broke. So that's pretty cool. One of my biggest issues with purchasing online or even purchasing at certain stores or even purchasing from a tool truck is the amount of wait period that I have for that. So let's talk about that real briefly, and then we'll dive back into some of the other old things that you're going to run into on old cars. Okay, so first off, look, I don't like having to mail a tool in to get replaced. I don't like having to take a picture to wait for it to be replaced later on down the road. I don't like having to go onto the tool truck only to find out they can't fix it and I have to wait a week to 3 weeks for them to actually warranty it out or repair it or fix it and give me an exchange product. That sucks. The tools that I like to purchase are the ones that are fairly inexpensive that I can literally walk in, walk out. Let's face it, that is the go-to mentality for me as a mechanic. If I'm going to buy a tool from a big box store, whether it's Home Depot, Lowe's, Harbor Freight, Sears, etc., I want to be able to know that I can walk in, item for item, exchange, and move about my business. Now, some of those stores I have to travel a little bit farther to than others, and I'm sure your situation is no different than mine. But that's what I prefer over anything else. I don't like having to wait for something to receive in the mail. I'm not against it, because I know that Amazon, I know that they're like Tekton and even Icon, they're pretty, from what I can gather, their shipping is pretty quick. Now, I haven't received or broken anything from the Icon lineup to tell you guys how quick that is. I haven't broken or received anything from Tekton to tell you how quick that is. I have broken and received tools from Amazon, and it's a fairly quick turnaround, I would say within a week. Okay, so now we get back to the tool trucks. Tool trucks, yes, the tool truck does have a benefit. Most cases, if they have the tool on hand, they can exchange like item for like item, or they'll break up a set to change it out and they'll order one and then they'll put it back in the set. That's cool if they have it available. If they don't, you still have to wait about 1, and I've waited up to 3 weeks to get. Now, one of the other situations I ran into with tool trucks, this is the part that makes me not want to purchase from tool trucks, is that if they decide to go out of business, either retire, get fired, or quit and move on to something different, it makes it a little bit more difficult for me to be able to warranty out that tool unless I email the company, see what they can do, and then try to figure out how to mail it in, etc., show proof of purchase, and then eventually get it warrantied out. Kind of a pain in the ass if you ask me, okay? So that's how I feel about that. But overall, yes, there are a million different ways that you could possibly warranty out a product, but my favorite way is to walk in and walk out. That's my favorite way. It's been my be-all, end-all for years, okay? That's the reason why I buy from a lot of the big box stores, and then I start looking at online purchasing, and then I start looking at buying from a tool truck. So I have my various opinions about warranty, lifetime agreement, guarantee, manufacturing flaws, etc. Going back to old cars, so just outside of fastener fitment, the tools that you have available and don't have available, look, it was a lot easier to work on older cars than it is today, but there was a lot more trickier things that you had to know too, because some of those vehicles did not have the same exact 12-volt system that we have today. Some of those were, it was reverse polarity, right? Like the positive was pretty much like the one thing that you would disconnect. You could disconnect the negative and test the generator, not the alternator, but you could test the generator and find out if it was defective or not. The V-belts were different than the serpentine belts, or drive belts that you're used to today. There wasn't really a tensioner. There was you had the bolt. It's this long bolt that you could adjust for the tightness and fitment of the belt. So there was a lot of things that kind of went into that. There was also more tweaks and modifications that you could do to a muscle car. Parts are a lot easier to find for a muscle car than it is for a, let's just say, more modern but not so new car. Most cars nowadays, manufacturer companies have a 10-year grace period where they say they can refuse the right to sell any part, and it goes into the aftermarket world. Aftermarket world does the same thing. 10 years after that 10 years, and they reserve the right to not sell it again. So now you get into a position where you can't find parts for your car. If it's early 90s or mid 90s or late 90s, you can't find it, or you have a difficult time doing it. Perfect example would be the CRX, the Honda CRX that I had. Could not find an idle air control valve to save my life. Had to pay for an illegal smog, couldn't find one at the wrecking yard, couldn't find one on eBay, couldn't find one on rockauto.com, couldn't buy one from O'Reilly's, Napa, AutoZone, CarQuest, shucks, you name it, Pep Boys, I couldn't find it, okay? So it left me in a pinch. So I got rid of the vehicle and I traded into something else that I thought was a little bit more easier to work on, that I could find parts for. Now we're going to dive into some older cars that you can always find parts for. Let's talk about that for a second. Jeeps. Jeeps are really easy to find parts for because there's a lot of off-road websites, there's a lot of off-road companies and aftermarket websites that make parts for Jeeps. That's why I love Jeeps so much. There's a lot of other resources out there that you can jump onto for, like the Dodge Chargers, the Challengers, the Darts. Now we start diving into small block Chevrolet, big block Ford, small block Ford. You can still find parts for these vehicles online. Speedway.com, perfect example. You can go on there and find things. You can find AN fittings. You can find fuel pumps, electronic fuel pumps. You can figure out how to change the rear end out. So if you have a Chevy Camaro but you want a Ford 9-inch, you can get a drive shaft that's actually fitted for that. If you have a Power Glide but you want to adapt it to, like, I don't know, some small block Ford, you can get what's called a Transdap and you can adapt it. There are so many different things that you can do with an old car that you just can't do with newer cars. So those are some other things that I like about old cars. Some of the things that I don't like about working on old cars. It's old. There's rust. There's deterioration. These components like vacuum lines on Fords, don't even get me started. They start to get dry, they get brittle, they fall apart. Next thing you know, you're using little tiny pieces of vacuum tubing to try to connect these things back together. It is an absolute nightmare. I've got a laundry list of vehicles that I'll never work on. And that's got to be up there, right next to RVs. I'm telling you that much. And as much as I used to hate diesels, I got to tell you what, I'd almost rather take a Ford 6-liter over anything that has to do with Ford and their little plastic vacuum lines that disintegrate. The Triton V8s with their spark plugs and their all-knowing design of that and how hard that is, and if you break one, you have to figure out how to extract it. Guys, there are so many different things that you're going to run into as a mechanic that make it extremely difficult for you to get your job done. But look, that's all I got for this video. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your opinions. Feel free to share them down in the comments. Let me know, what old cars or vehicles do you prefer to work on, and which ones do you not want to work on? If you had to own a muscle car, what brand would you most likely go to? Would it be Chevrolet? Would it be Ford? Would it be Dodge? Give me your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. That's all I got for this video. Cheers to those of you that have your beers. I'll see you next time. Deuces.